Hello, friends on the path, people who are working to end suffering. Glad to have this chance to be together and to share. And there's some things I'd like to talk about today. But firstly, we can begin with a meditation, a short meditation practice. Get comfortable. Find a place for your body to be at rest, but also to be aware. So kind of having a relaxed body, but also a position that's ready to face and to confront our lived experience. Find that position and find your breathing. Find your mind where it is at this moment. The mind's always moving around, so if we can place our attention on our breathing, we can also see where the mind is. Breathing in the mind at this moment. Breathing out the mind at this moment. Feeling the subtle sensations of the breath. The feeling of the breath in the stomach, in the chest. Feeling the breath in the nose. And with that feeling of the breathing, relax the body, relax the mind, but also alert and aware and present with what's happening. Feeling what's happening right now completely and totally. Not trying to get something out of what's happening. Not trying to avoid something about what's happening. But just experiencing what's happening. Here and now. Not in the past, not in the future. Not in our thoughts about things, but just the real experience of what's happening at this moment. Because we're so often looking outside, it's important to turn inside and being aware of what's happening inside the body, the mind, being together with what's happening that has no inside or outside. Great. So the title of our live stream today, of our little video today, is to change our algorithm, to change your algorithm. I've recently been transitioning away from the monastic life and this kind of container and structure of being a monk into an environment where I have more freedom and a mind where I have more freedom to do what I want to do and kind of avoid things, maybe avoid my responsibilities of spiritual practice and seek out other things, relationships or getting drunk or watching movies all the time, watching a lot of TikTok or YouTube. And that's a part of my practice right now, actually, is to navigate that new allotment of freedom, that access to, not wearing the robes all the time and not having this identity on me, kind of limiting me. And I've noticed a lot that the mind is really influenced so strongly by this algorithm. And whatever social media platform I take a look at or make use of, there's all these advertisements that aren't really advertisements. They're kind of advertisements for desire, advertisements for sensuality, advertisements for finding happiness or finding self-satisfaction, finding freedom in getting pleasure and avoiding pain. This really interferes with the capacity to stop seeking and to face what is actually here and now. And a lot of times that's suffering. That suffering, that sense of suffering is like a constant push to get away from the suffering and a constant push to, eat something or consume something or take something in that's, seems to not be that suffering. And the spiritual path, this work and this practice of ending suffering is, it takes time. Just like if you wanted to change your body, you wanted to become more physically fit, or you wanted to change your job or your lifestyle or the kind of people that you're in relationship with, it's not something that's just going to happen when you snap your fingers. So changing the algorithm of your life becomes very, very important. If we're not able to start to look in other directions from what's normal in our society or what's normal for us as being people and human beings that want to experience pleasure and want to avoid pain, then this constant repetition of those things that don't benefit us on a spiritual level is going to continue. What I recommend is that we start to make time and we start to give priority towards listening to Dharma talks, listening to guided meditations. It may even seem like overeating or over-consuming or a kind of seeking towards meditation or seeking towards the spiritual path. But if we don't step in, if we don't get involved in this seeking towards spirituality, this seeking towards meditation, this seeking towards listening to instructions and listening to guidance from people who plainly have a lot more wisdom and compassion than we do, a lot more experience in the path than we do, then we're always going to revert back to the same old coping mechanisms that we've always had. And as we're trying to get rid of this suffering, we're trying to end this suffering because we feel so much of it. it's going to be quite easy to feel depressed. It's going to be quite easy to feel hopeless. So we have to start to tell the algorithm. And if you're using YouTube, if you're using TikTok, if that's a regular part of your life, then that's where your algorithm is. So you need to use YouTube to listen to guided meditations. You need to use TikTok to find Buddhist teachers. And if you find that there aren't many Buddhist teachers to find on TikTok, maybe you need to use it less. But we're not going to become monks. We're not going to go and live in the forest. Most of us are going to continue our normal everyday lives. So some way, one way or another, you have to start the practice of taking refuge in the Buddhist teachings, or taking refuge in the spiritual teachings that are directing you and guiding you and making it clear for you that this constant habit energy of seeking pleasure and trying to avoid pain is simply not going to work. That it's never going to work. That pleasure is not the answer to your suffering. That avoiding pain is not the answer to your suffering. Now we can approach that in a lot of different ways. We can start to go to the gym and practice no pain, no gain. We can start to drive Uber Eats for 16 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day. We can try to make more money. We can try to force ourselves through difficulty so that somehow we'll get this profit on the other side of our path or our practice, this profit in the future. But what we really need to start doing is to start stopping more seriously. Start to stop, to sit in meditation and begin to face and encounter and confront your defilements, your attachments, your suffering. Because you have the capacity internally as a human being and as someone who has been contacted by the Dharma, been contacted by the Buddhist teachings, or have been contacted by the information that meditation exists, you have a capacity to face, to transform, and to transcend that suffering. So we can use cappuccino. We can use going into a different environment so that we have more supportive conditions for how we live our lives. We can use spending less time on TikTok or spending less time on YouTube. We can use taking up 5 precepts. So we start to emphasize how we live virtuously. We live, not virtually, but live and being as a good person. We make a commitment to that. But when it comes down to it, this practice is your willingness and your capacity to stop those compulsive habits, that compulsive energy that leads you to never-ending seeking. And you're not going to be able to do that alone. Nobody is going to be able to do that alone. So if you can find a meditation center or a Buddhist temple in your area, go and check it out. But in the meantime, you look, you search on YouTube Buddhist teachers. You search for guided meditations. And yeah, there's some that are better and some that are worse, but this isn't pre-recorded. And your life isn't pre-recorded. Your life isn't predetermined, but you're allowing it to be predetermined towards suffering unless you can start to stop. Unless you can start to say, wait a minute, I'm aware of my suffering, I'm experiencing my suffering, and I'm willing to face and experience that. I'm willing to put my body down. I'm willing to set my mind onto what's happening right here and now and face this suffering. If you try to do that with your own understanding, it can be very difficult. But if you start to do that with the supportive conditions of listening to guided meditations, listening to Dharma talks from people like Ajahn Brahm, not as something that you can put in your piggy bank of spiritual experience. So you tell your friends or you tell yourself, oh, I listened to a Dharma talk today. Oh, I'm doing better than I was. That's never going to be helpful. But this staff that is stuck in the ground, in the here and now, in the here and now of eternity, that says, I'm going to face what's happening right now, internally. And what I've found in my own path and practice is that I kind of have to suffer enough to feel the impetus or the encouragement to do that. And luckily, I have a background of experience with Buddhism and with meditation, so I have this faith that actually works because I've experienced it a lot of time. But if you don't have the faith that works, you just have to do it. You just have to try. To cut through the constant thinking mind, to cut through the constant seeking mind, to cut through the mind of I am suffering. You have to shatter that. You have to break through that, not by what you think, but by your actions. And you need to do this continuously, eternally, in the here and now. And so when you feel that suffering, when you have this period of time of openness, maybe you don't have a job like me, instead of just dwelling in that suffering and kind of being a sense of laziness or a sense of, well, what can I do now to make myself feel better? And going from one thing to another, just trying to make yourself feel better, you have to stop and start to look, to understand, to digest, to face this suffering that is here and now. In the body, in the mind, in the way that it is right here and now. And when we go to face the mind, when we go to face and be with and directly experience that suffering, cut out all of the idealism. We don't practice meditation to feel better. We don't practice meditation to understand something about ourselves. We practice meditation as an act of penetrating into the direct experience of the mind here and now. For ourselves, not for somebody else. We're not explaining ourselves to anyone. We're not explaining ourselves to ourselves. Meditation is a practice that has nothing to do with explaining. If we can practice like this, if we can be willing to stop and sit down and bite our tongue and grit our teeth and be open and willing to experience the suffering that is there, that we're trying to avoid, that we're trying to cover up, that we're trying to understand, that we're trying to solve, 100% we can transform that suffering. But we have to start being more willing to work with our minds instead of allowing the algorithm to work on our minds. And if you're using the algorithm, as people who grew up in my generation and of course the younger generations, we're watching YouTube all the time. We're watching TikTok all the time. We are constantly consuming, digesting, taking in, right, content. So you have to begin to shift your focus to take in this content that is based in the Dharma, based in the Dhamma, based in the teachings of the Buddha, or the teachings to end suffering. Because we can't rely on anyone else. We can't rely on me. We can't rely on the other people around us. We can't rely on our thoughts that we have about ourselves. We certainly can't rely on the society or the government. And what makes a Dharma teacher, what makes a Buddhist teacher valuable and real and important here in changing the algorithm is that they are teaching and directing us on how to rely on facing suffering. Because you can't transform something that you're unwilling to face. So these recurrent ebbs and flows, this daily up and down that you, that I, that everyone is going through, can only be transformed by going right down into the source code. The source code of the mind, the source code of suffering. And you can only have access to that source code if you're willing to put everything else aside for a period of time and to sit and to face that source code of suffering. And if you can't do that alone, you can do that while listening to Buddhist teachers, Ajahn Brahm, Thich Nhat Hanh, Tibetan Buddhist teachers, Chinese Buddhist teachers, Vietnamese Buddhist teachers, Western Buddhist teachers, whoever it is that you can contact, and you sit down and you listen. And you start to shift your understanding away from personal thinking towards stopping, and facing what is here and now. That has nothing to do with the story, that has nothing to do with your opinions or judgments, that has nothing to do with your thoughts about yourself. Thoughts about suffering are not suffering. Thoughts about our emotions are not those emotions. Thoughts about ourselves are not ourselves. Thoughts about reality are not reality. And we learn that by looking directly at reality. So where are you going to look for reality if not here? The problem is never outside. The problem is always inside. The problem is in the heart. The problem is in the breath. The problem is in the moment-to-moment mind experience that's not based in thinking. So we use the meditation technique, or we use the technique of the guided meditation from the Buddhist master, some awesome Buddhist monk, to focus our attention to examining the moment-by-moment experience, examining our resistance to what's happening, examining where our desire pulls us. When we feel this ball of suffering, when we feel that our life is an experience of deep suffering, and then we can say, oh, okay, I'm going to face that in meditation, you're now overcoming the tendency to be afraid. Because you're not afraid of someone, you're not afraid of something, you're not afraid of some place or some situation or some experience. You're afraid of suffering. And the Buddha teaches that there is a cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is our want for something. Meditation is the practice of stopping the habit of wanting or seeking something. With each and every moment of breathing. Or each and every moment of chanting our mantra. We have any questions so far? So let's take a gander at some of these teachings. We become curious about not just avoiding suffering or avoiding pain, or getting more pleasure, getting more success in our business lives, or whatever it might be that we want to get. But we actually become curious about the cause of suffering and what suffering actually is. Start to look at it, get to the root of things. We do have a question from someone on the live stream here. So any advice on dealing with energy trapped in the head during meditation? There's no trapped. Take away the word trapped. Because in meditation, the only thing that we're trying to do in meditation is to stop trying to avoid what is already there. So the advice, if you have energy trapped in the head, or energy trapped in your butt, or energy trapped in your foot, the advice and the guidance for that is to stop trying to change it and start trying to look at it. Start trying to be willing to be with it. And when we're kind of loosey-goosey, meaning we're just going with the flow, our ability and our capacity to actually be here and now is very vague. It's very vapid. It doesn't have depth. It doesn't have authenticity. It doesn't have clarity. It doesn't have sharpness or brightness. So that's why when we experience a lot of suffering, when you find yourself in your bed or your chair or your house or wherever in your car and you're overwhelmed with suffering, to take out the key, to turn off the key, to stop, to pull over and use your meditation technique, such as focusing on your breathing, not to try and get yourself into a trance or try to avoid that suffering, but to focus and face that suffering and look at it right where it is. Look at reality right where it is, with concentration, with energy, with virya, with a liveliness. So that pain or that suffering or that difficulty, it helps you, it motivates you, it gives you guidance that this is for real. This is serious. This is important. So maybe I'll share a verse here from this Achan teaching. The Chan masters say, in effect, let us get to the root of things. Once we have heard, studied, or intuitively discovered enough to know what Buddhism is about, let us relinquish everything in a tremendous effort to focus our minds on what is real. So long as our minds are out of focus, the objects of the senses, the sensations to which they give rise, and the stored results of those sensations will impinge upon them, setting up endless chains of action and reaction. The process of correcting this wrong focus or false vision can be counted gradual only in the sense that most people require long and careful preparation. But true perception, when we have learnt how to be ready for it, will burst upon us in a flash. Though our minds remain out of focus by no more than, so to speak, a millionth of an inch, everything will still seem to us very nearly as it seemed before, despite our careful preparation. However, when true focus is attained, reality will flash upon us. The whole universe of phenomena will be seen as it really is. Its power to hamper and afflict us will be instantaneously destroyed. Our remaining stores of karma will be burnt up in that flash, and nothing will remain for us except the duty of pointing the way so that others, in their turn, may achieve the ultimate vision just as we have done. When that final intuition bursts upon us like a blinding light, we shall discover that nothing exists or ever has existed except in our minds. That is, indeed, our minds are not our minds, but mind itself. That this mind is perfectly quiescent, a pure void in that it is utterly without form, characteristics, opposites, plurality, subject, object, or anything at all on which to lay hold. And yet that it is certainly not void in that it is beginningless, beginning and endless end of all phenomena which from moment to moment contribute to the unceasing flux of what we call existence. The void is at once the container and the contained, the one and the many, the neither one nor many, the doomed and the deathless, relativity and ultimate truth, samsara and nirvana, without a hair's breadth of difference between any of these or other pairs. So what is this saying? It's saying that the true nature of your mind is like space. And everything originates out of it, everything that you can imagine, and everything returns to it, without beginning and without end. And so this mind is not subject to reactivity. And the reason that we practice meditation seriously is to orient ourselves to understand the nature of the mind. So that instead of going on and on, spiraling in suffering, spiraling in desire and fear, spiraling in complicated thoughts about ourselves and others and the environment, we actually learn how to return to this mind of awareness. And when there's a problem, when there's a friction, when there's a confusion inside the mind that's causing suffering, it's not so much that we're trying to fix it or solve it or get rid of it, but beginning to become aware of what's actually going on. Perceiving this, we shall seem to others to have taken a sudden leap, as though from somewhere to nowhere. Indeed, sudden leap, though inaccurate, is perhaps the best term with which to describe the process. Yet in truth, we shall have leapt from nowhere to nowhere. Hence, we shall not have leapt at all. Nor will there be, or has there ever been, any we to make the leap. Nothing will have changed except our point of view. What was formerly misperceived in the light of our little egos, we shall now rightly perceive in the glorious light of egolessness. Thenceforth, through our environment, the surrounding flux will continue its moment-to-moment transformations as before. We shall be capable of seeing all this play of phenomena as tiny ripples upon the surface of changelessness. We shall clearly recognize the changelessness of change. As a mirror impartially reflects green and red, black and white, without being to the smallest extent affected by any of them, as the spray of a waterfall reflects all the colors of the rainbow without losing its colorless purity. As dreamers behold acts of love and violence without moving so much as a hand, so does the mind of an enlightened one react to the ceaseless play of phenomena. All of this will be more or less so in the deepest spiritual sense. And yet we should be aware of taking these analogies of mirror, spray, and dreamer too concretely. For even a mirror suggests a plurality of the reflector, the act of reflecting and the thing reflected, whereas these three do not in truth differ from one another, so that beyond a certain point, even the mirror is a mere analogy, another raft to be discarded. So in this, we're discarding everything. We're discarding our whole lives as if it was a piece of trash. And we get to experience this firsthand when we face the suffering. When we stop our compulsive activities of seeking after this and trying to avoid that, and we sit down on our butt and we face reality. We face suffering. We face our direct experience without trying to add anything and without trying to get rid of anything. That's our real and true meditation practice. And if you don't have much experience in that, you can do that while listening to guided meditations from Buddhist monks, from Buddhist meditation masters. You can do that while listening to Dharma talks like this about the nature of the way that things actually are. Suffering, its cause, the path to ending suffering, and nibbana. Freedom, peace. Well, I don't really agree with the term childish. I think that's an inappropriate term. Black people have black skin. Women have uteruses, usually. And people from Asia look different than people from Estonia. So a lot of the child-based thinking, or the ideas that we have in children, are built up on structures of discrimination or structures of objectification of children. So your inner child is you, here and now. There's no such thing as being childish, just like there's no such thing as being blackish or womanish. These are just ways of viewing the world that maybe wrongly objectify groups of people or classes of people based on arbitrary characteristics often. And so what you're referring to, Brennan, is kind of a psychological model, and I'm not here to teach about that. But there's no such thing as being childish, but there is certainly such a thing as systematic judgment and prejudgment and prejudice against children. And our inner child is here and now. Your inner child is right here. This is your inner child. What you can say is that we need care. We need attention. We need support. We need community. So we say, oh, those children are the ones that need that, but actually, I'm an adult. I don't need those kinds of things. I'm more independent. That's not really true. You have to learn how to take responsibility for your life and for yourself and for reality right here and right now. Cutting out all the BS of the story of yourself, the story of your life, the story of the world. Once you learn how to do that, then you can start working with your story or working with the world or working with what you think you need to work with. But the core of the problem of your suffering has nothing to do with a character-based psychological description or narrative about yourself or the environment or anything at all. That's just not, it just doesn't work for a lot of people. It doesn't work for me. So the Buddha teaches us very clearly that there is suffering, and all of us, we don't want to suffer. So we share that in common. It doesn't matter if you're beautiful or wealthy or ugly and poor or super physically abled or super physically disabled or very intelligent or very unintelligent. It does not matter. You're suffering for sure. There's all kinds of different qualities and ways that we notice suffering in ourselves, but you're suffering for sure. The cause of that suffering, on a very subtle level, like neurons and atoms, is that you want something other than what is already here. You are looking for something outside of this experience. And in this experience, you're trying to avoid something that's here. So stop looking, stop avoiding. That's how we begin to understand the mechanisms within ourselves of suffering, of why we suffer so much. And the problem that many of us are facing is not that we don't know how to live a good life or have a good experience, but there are habit energies, or there is a general weather pattern in our brain, in our mind, in our life that has been built up according to the culture and the environment that we grew up in, and not just this life, but also past lives. And that is expressing itself continuously. So sure, sometimes we feel fine, sometimes we feel very horrible. The problem is that we're getting lost in feeling fine, and we're getting lost in feeling horrible. When you are aware that you feel fine, stop and examine your mind. And especially when you are aware that you feel horrible, it's more difficult to do it when you feel fine. That's why a lot of us may get an idea of wealthy, or sometimes of wealthy or successful or happy people not dealing with suffering, because they're dealing with a quality of suffering that's based in pleasure or pleasantness. Still suffering. They're still not satisfied. They're still seeking and chasing. So when you feel this immense and powerful suffering, your depression, your anxiety, whatever it might be, you have to learn how to stop and face the mind, or stop and listen to a Dharma talk, or stop and listen to a guided meditation from a well-known advisor, well-known Buddhist master. So that on a very subtle level, you can begin to unpack this mechanism of suffering, or this mechanism of a moment-by-moment desire and fear that is constantly perpetuating itself in you. And your avoidance, your ego's avoidance of that experience of suffering is just like a very gross or a very outside of the immediate experience way of coping with that experience of avoidance, of what's actually happening within, or that experience of desire. And so when we learn to stop and face that suffering in meditation, okay, we now have the capacity to direct our lives in a way that's not based on avoidance or pleasure seeking. And if we don't do that, if we don't learn how to do that, if we don't practice that, our entire ego, our entire life is based in pleasure seeking and pain avoidance. This isn't about you becoming a Sigma, Omega, Chad, six-pack, David Goggins marathon runner. It's about you becoming a free person, or finding freedom inside of suffering, rather than trying to find freedom outside of suffering. All right. That's a very good sign, Edgar. You're doing great. Okay, so let's open up the book of some of the teachings of Master Ma Zu, getting into the Chan, getting into the sudden enlightenment, sudden awakening. So this is entitled The Essential Gateway to Truth by Means of Instantaneous Awakening. These are the words of Master Ma Zu, and some maybe another monk nearby asking questions so he can answer them. Humbly I prostrate myself before the Buddhas of the 10 quarters and the excellent company of bodhisattvas. In setting forth this treatise, I am apprehensive that I may fail correctly to interpret the sacred mind. If so, may I be given a chance for repentance and reform. However, if I do succeed in imparting the sacred truth, I dedicate the resultant merit to all living beings in the hope that each of them will attain Buddhahood in their next life. There's nothing more important than nothing. Because the closest way that you can describe reality as it is here and now is nothing. Because all of the things in the reality that your mind is grabbing onto and identifying with and creating a narrative about are bound to reality. And reality in Buddhism has 3 marks. So that thing, it doesn't matter what thing it is, a material thing or a mental thing, a name or a form. That thing is impermanent. That thing is doesn't actually exist. So impermanent means it is hopeless. Okay? It's going to go away. That thing is doesn't exist separately from all other things, which means it's ridiculous to point to it by itself. And thirdly, that thing is unsatisfactory. That thing is ultimately not going to quench the thirst of suffering or to end suffering. So no thing is going to end suffering. So if we can put down all things, and this is really what the teaching is about and the practice is about, being willing to put down all things and face the root of the mind. Don't speculate, just listen. And you'll see for yourself if it benefits or not. I don't plan on doing a survey. All right, here's a question for Master Ma Zu. What method must we practice in order to attain deliverance? So remember, why are you here? Remember, why am I here? Remember, what is this all about? This nonsense, this body and mind, this life, okay? You are suffering. I am suffering. The society, the world, all those people are suffering. Okay? We want, I want, you want to end suffering. I don't want to suffer anymore. Period. It doesn't need to be bubble tea. It doesn't need to be coffee. It doesn't need to be $1 million. It doesn't need to be a milkshake. It doesn't need to be anything, but 100% period, I don't want to suffer anymore. Period. So the question here is, what method must we practice in order to attain deliverance? Deliverance from suffering. Deliverance from birth and death, coming into being and going out of being. I'm smiling, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm depressed. I'm smiling, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm depressed. The worst of the worst, constant suffering. Okay? What method must we practice in order to attain deliverance, freedom, salvation, hallelujah? How do we do it? What method? Answer. It can be attained only through a sudden illumination. Sudden illumination. Question, what is sudden illumination? Sudden means ridding yourselves of deluded thoughts. Okay? Deluded thoughts here are thoughts involving the dualism of opposites, such as love and hatred, distinctions between self and other, and all the countless thinking processes which proceed from unillumined minds. Let's rewind here. Let's go back. What method must we practice in order to attain deliverance, in order to attain freedom? How do we do it? Answer. It can be attained only through a sudden illumination. What the heck is sudden illumination? What's that? Sudden means ridding yourselves of deluded thoughts instantaneously. Illumination means the realization that illumination is not something to be attained. So this sudden illumination means an instantaneous ridding yourself of all deluded thoughts and points of view related to good and bad and positive and negative, instantaneously. And the realization that that is not something attained. That you didn't get that. That you didn't get the ending of thoughts. From where do we start this practice? Answer, you must start from the very root. Okay, and in general, the root is right here and right now. It's not tomorrow and it's not yesterday. The real answer, mind is the root. So we're going back to this awareness of suffering, awareness of depression, awareness of the nightmare of yourself, and stopping and facing the mind. Stopping and facing the mind. How can this be known? How can the mind be known? Answer. The Lankavatara Sutra says, when mental processes arise, then do all dharmas or phenomena spring forth. And when mental processes cease, then do all dharmas cease likewise. The Vimalakirti Sutra says, those desiring to attain the Pure Land must first purify their own minds. For the purification of mind is the purity of the Buddha land. So your own mind is the land of Buddha. And when mental processes, when thoughts, when situations, when mental experiences arise, that is all phenomena. So this reality is mind only. We are in a holosphere. The matrix is real. Wooza, wooza, wooza. Trust me, you don't want to go there. It's not a fun place, but listen, this is really interesting. All is mind. Your mind is the whole shebang. The phone is your mind. All the TikTok videos are your mind. All the YouTube videos are your mind. The whole world is your mind. So listen to this. All right. Going back. What method must we practice in order to attain liberation, freedom from suffering? Answer. It can only be attained through a sudden illumination, an instantaneous illumination. So what is sudden illumination? Sudden means ridding yourselves of deluded thoughts. Basically, any thought that you can come up with is deluded, all right? So sudden means ridding yourselves of deluded thoughts instantaneously. Illumination means the realization that illumination is not something to be attained. That this freedom from suffering is not something that you can get, not something that you can own, not something that you can possess. So from where do we start this practice? You must start from the very root, the root of the heart, the root of the mind, the root of your breathing processes. And what is that? What is that root? Mind is the root. So, question, how can this be known? How can we know the root? How can we reach the root of the mind? How can we understand it? Well, the Lankavatara Sutra says that when mental processes arise, then do all phenomena spring forth. And when mental processes cease, then do all dharmas cease likewise. So what arises is there, and what does not arise is not there. Can you imagine? So, the Vimalakirti Sutra says, those desiring to attain the Pure Land, so this pure mind, this peaceful, free heart life experience, where we're not suffering anymore, those desiring to attain the Pure Land must first purify their own minds. Now, if you were to look at this in a Christian sense, which I often do, if you want to get to heaven, you have to accept not just the idea of the Bible or the idea of Christianity, but you have to literally and directly accept Christ into your heart. You have to accept the consciousness of Christ into your heart. So, those desiring to attain the Pure Land must first purify their own minds. For the purification of mind is the purity of the Buddha land. So it's kind of like our meditation practice. Our way of going along in meditation is dancing in the Pure Land, is dancing in the Buddha land. That this is already the Pure Land. That this is the home of Buddha. And this mental purification is kind of our way of sweeping the floor of the Buddha's home, which is here. Now, the Sutra of the doctrine bequeathed by the Buddha says, just by mind control, all things become possible to us. In another sutra, it says, I want to stop here and I want to clarify this. This is not the mind control of the ego. This is the mind control of facing your mind. Facing and penetrating to the root of your mind. I have a daily sweeping practice because the temple that I'm staying at here in Taiwan, they asked me to do 20 minutes in the morning of sweeping and 20 minutes in the afternoon, evening of sweeping. So I've also been sweeping and practicing meditation, as I hope that we all have. Okay? In another sutra, it says, sages seek from mind, not from the Buddha. Fools seek from the Buddha instead of seeking from mind. Wise people regulate their minds rather than their personas. Fools regulate their personas rather than their minds. The Sutra of the Names of the Buddha states, evil springs forth from the mind, and by the mind evil is overcome. Now listen to how important that is. Where does suffering spring forth from? Where does your depression spring forth from? Where does your anxiety spring forth from? Where do your negative thoughts about yourself or the world that make you feel suffering spring from? Okay? The Sutra of the Names of the Buddha states, evil springs forth from the mind, and by the mind is evil overcome. So when you feel that suffering, when you feel that depression, when you feel that, we can't really name it, but it's a suffering, we're suffering. When you feel that, remember this teaching, this evil of suffering. Nothing more evil than suffering, right? All the evil that we do comes from the real evil, which is that sense of suffering. Evil springs forth from the mind, and by the mind, evil is overcome. Thus, we may know that all good and evil proceed from our minds, and that mind is therefore the root. If you desire deliverance, you must first know about the root. This is the process we're involved with, of knowing about the root. Okay, the link is in the description of this video. If you desire deliverance, you must first know all about the root. Unless you can penetrate to this truth, all your efforts will be in vain. For while you are still seeking something from forms external to yourselves, you will never attain. This is instantaneous and immediate teaching, friends. This is not bingo night. This is not our turn at the casino. Please listen closely, okay? Evil springs forth, the suffering, the wanting, the desire to improve. Evil springs forth, the desire to get, the desire to have, okay? Listen. Evil springs forth from the mind, and by the mind is evil overcome. Thus we may know that all good and evil proceed from our minds, and that mind is therefore the root. So the root of all your experiences is the mind. So, if you desire deliverance, you must first know all about the root. So our practice is mind examining. Unless you can penetrate to this truth, all your efforts will be in vain. For, while you are still seeking something from forms external to yourselves, you will never attain. The Dhyana Paramita Sutra says, for as long as you direct your search to the forms around you, you will not attain your goal, even after eon upon eon. Whereas by contemplating your inner awareness, you can achieve Buddhahood in a single flash of thought. Let's open our ears. Open our ears, okay? For as long as you direct your search to the forms around you, what this means is that the forms around you, the way that the forms already are, okay, are the conditions that you use to direct your search to the root of the mind. For as long as you direct your search to the forms around you, you will not attain your goal, even after eon upon eon. Whereas by contemplating your inner awareness, you can achieve Buddhahood in a single flash of thought. We're going to end our live stream on Facebook, but you're welcome to join us on YouTube. We're going to go for a little field trip. Breathing in, I go back to the island within myself. There are beautiful trees within the island. There are blue skies and water, there are birds, sunshine and fresh air. Breathing out, I feel safe. I enjoy going back to my island. Breathing in, I go back to the island within myself. There are beautiful trees within the island. There are blue skies and water. There are birds, sunshine and fresh air. Breathing out, I feel safe. I enjoy going back to my island. Good job, Tabernacle. That's the answer to all the questions that came up so far. So no one else can do the practice for you. No one else can give you the answer to these questions. It's something that you truly, as Ryokan says, why do you so earnestly seek the truth in distant places? Look for delusion and truth in the bottom of your own heart, right here and right now. Ryokan is one of my idols. But to get to that place, you have to sacrifice a lot. Because until you learn the practice of sacrifice as a yogi, as a monk or a nun, or as a layperson, as a major donor, a major volunteer, someone who offers a lot of service, a lot of self-sacrifice through generosity, you simply don't have much access to your heart because your heart is bounded. Your heart is binded by self-affliction, self-fixation. So you have to, in this path, you have to make a choice to step into going out of the vexation of self-concern into the practice of sacrifice. And you can do that as a donor, as a volunteer, or you can step into spiritual life, you can attend meditation retreat, you can sacrifice your free will. In one way or another, you have to become devoted to generosity. And you can't think your way to that position. You have to take the things that you value and you have to sacrifice them. You have to give them away. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You've got to do the work of generosity. You have to do the work of self-sacrifice to take those chains of self-interest off your heart. There's many different ways to do that, but the most traditional, practical life experience ways to do that are going to be becoming a major donor or volunteer concerned with this path and Buddhism, attending meditation retreats, or becoming a monk or a nun. Because when we don't have a relationship with generosity, that practice of meditation and that practice of listening to Dharma talks, etc., and guided meditation, it's always going to have this poison of self-interest in it. So what can I get from this? Using what I have, what can I get from this? And you have to reverse that into how can I use what I have to benefit others? And doing that concerned with the Buddhist path, the Buddhist Sangha, the Buddhist teachings, concerned with the Buddha, is just like the difference between listening to a random guided meditation from somebody who took a mindfulness certification course to listening to a guided meditation from a Dzogchen master or a Chan master or a meditation master in the Buddhist tradition. So you have to be serious about it and stop trying to get your cheap fix or stop trying to get an easy win. Because there's no easy wins in facing suffering. So, question. By what means is the root practice to be performed? So what I was just talking about is kind of preparatory practices, and this is what the root practice, how to perform that. But having access to the root practice is going to be quite inaccessible until you do these preliminary and preparatory practices, okay? Devotional practices, self-sacrifice practices in a practical way according to your life and what you're attached to. And most of us are primarily attached to and live our lives through our money and our time of body and mind. So you have to sacrifice or give your money, or you have to sacrifice or give your body and mind time. So by what means is the root practice to be performed? Answer: only by sitting in meditation. For it is accomplished by dhyana or chan and samadhi. The Dhyana Paramita Sutra says dhyana and samadhi are essential to the search for the sacred knowledge of the Buddhas, for without these, the thoughts remain in tumult and the roots of goodness suffer damage. So, question, please describe dhyana and samadhi. Answer: when wrong thinking ceases, that is dhyana. So when wrong thinking ceases, that is chan, that is zen, that is in picking up the fork, there is just picking up the fork. There's no intention, there's no ideation, there's no duality, there's just picking up the fork. Or just walking, or just seeing, or just hearing. And the Bahiya Sutta is a good resource for that. So when wrong thinking ceases, that is dhyana or zen. When you sit contemplating your original nature, your self nature, the mind as it is, or reality as it is, that is samadhi. For indeed, that original nature is your eternal mind. By samadhi, you withdraw your minds, all these different kinds of minds that we have. By samadhi, you withdraw your minds from their surroundings, thereby making them impervious to the 8 winds or the 8 consistent lies of Buddhism that we maybe saw the recent video in HD. So by samadhi, by this sitting and contemplating your original nature, or the awareness of the mind's awareness as it is, you withdraw your minds from their surroundings, thereby making them impervious to the 8 worldly winds. That is to say, impervious to gain and loss, calumny and eulogy, praise and blame, sorrow and joy. By concentrating in this way, even ordinary people may enter the state of Buddhahood. How can that be so? The Sutra of the Bodhisattva Precepts says, all beings who observe the Buddha precept thereby enter Buddhahood. Other names for this are deliverance, gaining the further shore, transcending the 6 states of mortal beings, overleaping the 3 worlds, or becoming a mighty bodhisattva, an omnipotent sage, a conqueror. So what does that mean, becoming a mighty bodhisattva, an omnipotent sage, a conqueror? It means that when you are overflowing with the suffering, not just your suffering, but the suffering of the world or the suffering of the mind, when you are aware of that suffering and you stop and sit and face that mind, that is, and then transcend it, right? Face, transform, and transcend. You become this omnipotent sage, a conqueror. You become free from that suffering. Few more words? Yeah, a few more words, okay. So question, whereupon should the mind settle and dwell? Answer, it should settle upon non-dwelling and there dwell. Question, what is non-dwelling? It means not allowing the mind to dwell upon anything whatsoever. Okay? And question, and what is the meaning of that? Dwelling upon nothing means that the mind is not fixed upon good or evil, being or non-being, inside or outside, or somewhere between the two, void or non-void, concentration or distraction. This dwelling upon nothing is the state in which it should dwell. Those who attain it are said to have non-dwelling minds. In other words, they have Buddha minds. Okay, I think tomorrow or later we'll start back and look even more on this. Do we have any questions or sharing experience from our session this morning here in Taiwan? We'll have lunch soon. Recently, I've just been eating 1 meal a day. So the lunch meal is an important meal for the nourishment of the body so that I can continue my yogi life, meditation-based life. Good. Okay, get out there, volunteer, serve, explore, get concerned with the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, connect with Dharma talks online through YouTube. Give your energy, give your attention to this path, and I promise you that you won't regret it, because this path is really that which can cure that was once thought of as incurable. Okay? And if you're old, if you're young, if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're non-binary, doesn't matter. The root of the mind is the same and not different. Okay, we finish with a little prayer. May all beings throughout all realms of existence be well, happy, and peaceful. When encountering suffering, may they be ready and willing to stop, to face that suffering, to face the root of the mind, to transform that suffering and to transcend it, to enter into the great Buddha field, to enter into the path of non-suffering and benefiting all living beings everywhere. May it be, may it be, may it truly, truly be. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, don't forget to like and subscribe and share, and see you soon for more coming together and looking at the root of the mind. Bye for now.